Alrighty, greetings, friend buzz, enemies, and neutrals alike. Reading a little article here today. NASA to launch sounding rockets into moon's shadow during eclipse. The atmospheric perturbations around eclipse path, APEP, sounding rockets will launch from NASA's blah 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 blah. That sounds kind of wacky and crazy, doesn't it? Like, I don't remember them doing this before. Pretty cool though. Especially when you start to look at some of this data to see how the energies from the eclipse are affecting the planet and thus us. It's really quite interesting to watch it there. Here we have the eclipse from 2017, and you can see, well, the eclipse basically bisects the country. It leaves I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a series of waves you can see in the second half of it in particular. You can see the little each pulsating wave after it gets basically past the Mississippi. But it blankets the entire country. It sweeps the whole continent. You can see right there those little lines. I don't know if that's a radar artifact or something else. Really quite fascinating, though. But it got me to thinking. I had just been reading up on the legend of the god Neb-er-Cher and the history of creation. This was something I've looked into before. It's an Egyptian creation myth, basically, with Neb-er-Cher, basically lord to the utmost limit, a super god, whatever you want to call it. But what was interesting and what I had read, and what triggered this after reading that NASA article, see right here, the legend of creation is found in the third work, which is given in the papyrus, and which is called Book of Overthrowing APEP, the enemy of Ra, the enemy of Un-Nefer, Osiris. This work contained a series of spells which were recited during the performance of certain prescribed ceremonies with the object of preventing storms and dispersing rain clouds and removing any obstacle, animate or inanimate, which could prevent the rising of the sun in the morning or obscure his light during the day. The leader-in-chief of the hosts of darkness was a fiend called APEP, who appeared in the sky in the form of a monster serpent and, marshalling all fiends of the Tuat, attempted to keep the sun god imprisoned in the kingdom of darkness. Let that sink in for a second. Overthrowing APEP, enemy of the sun god, rituals to disperse rain clouds, and removing any obstacle which could prevent the rising of the sun or obscure his light during the day. Like an eclipse. They're sending something called APEP. APEP. Leader-in-chief of the host of darkness. Seeking to obscure the sun and hide the light of God, galactic emanations. You know what else that reminds me of? The Faravahar, the winged disc. And as I sat here contemplating this, and as I studied this carving of the Faravahar, I noticed that it's not just a winged disc, but it is a ringed disc. You can clearly see a ring with a circular section and then wings around it. You know what else we just saw recently? The sun just did this. I know pareidolia is a pretty common thing, so it's natural for a human to look at this and like, oh, look, I see the wings. It's like a birdie, man. You know, it's that hunter-gatherer pattern recognition. Fuck yeah, it is. But this is a hollow fractographic reality where everything follows the same generative patterns. So you get stuff like that. But I'm starting to think this isn't a representation of just the sun. The winged disc is not a traveler, a passerby, like the old Nibiru, the planet of the crossing and all that. You know what I see when I look at this now? I see a solar eclipse happening and something unusual happening during that solar eclipse. Now, if you look back at the lunar eclipse we just had on March 25th, we had a coronal mass ejection timed almost exactly with the time of the eclipse, which presents a fascinating scenario, potential scenario, in which another CME will be timed to be released coinciding with this eclipse. Now imagine that for a second. A large mass of plasma, ionized particles emanating from the sun, heading towards the Earth with the moon directly in front of it. What would happen? Well, that moon is going to disperse some of those particles, and as we can see from this map of the 2017, these charged particles have an effect on the entire area, sweeping right across. It's going to do that again. What happens if this time there's a coronal mass ejection hitting at the same time? It's going to blast around the edges of that moon. It's going to look like a winged disc. It's going to look like a fiery plasma serpent. It's going to look like so many things that were described in ancient times by people who didn't have the technological capacity that we have now, who didn't have the scientific understanding that we have now. Is this what the April 8th eclipse is going to be? Are we going to get hit by a CME during the eclipse? What kind of effect could that have on the realm? I can't wait to see.